Good evening, Peoria. Welcome to Whiskey Talks. Tonight we have Paul Leamon, Executive Director of Distillery Labs, Peoria's Regional Innovation Hub, and we're joined with our special guest today, Banu Hatfield, co-founder of Zion Coffee in Peoria. Welcome.
Thank you.
And yes, Banu, over to
Hi,
you.
good evening, everyone.
And so, tonight we're going to be sharing about Peoria's new innovation hub, Distillery Labs, and the face behind Distillery Labs, Paul Leamon. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Andrew. Yes, I am Paul Leamon. I have just gotten here to Peoria over the weekend, this last weekend. So this is my first week. And it's been an exciting, busy week and getting busier by the day. So I'm excited to be here and part of the Peoria community. Excited to be joining Distillery Labs as its first executive director. Have had a history on both corporate side as well as entrepreneurial side over the past 15 years of my career. Has been starting a wide variety of different businesses that hopefully we get a chance to talk about tonight. And now a new chapter of my life of giving back to the community and helping other entrepreneurs get their starts.
So, Paul, I have a question. What drew you to this opportunity?
Yeah, this it's a very exciting opportunity for me. So I've not spent a lot of time in Peoria before this past year. Been through the area, but not again spent much time here. But you know a little bit about Peoria from a distance. One, it's got a lot of large corporations that in my previous iterations of careers, I know that they've been super innovative. So there's a lot of exciting work that has come out of these corporations. The term just if it plays in Peoria is always something that resonates in your head, and so you think of Peoria as this place that is just salt of the earth type of people, a wide, diverse group that really represents an interesting body of folks across the United States, but right here in the Midwest. And then when I heard about Distillery Labs, just in terms of what innovation practices and entrepreneurship ecosystem that the community is wanting to develop, especially behind a fantastic grant that's coming from the state, I viewed it as an opportunity, again, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, of a new chapter, at least for me, wanting to give back to others. I've been the recipient of a lot of great advice, a lot of great mentors, a lot of great role models that have shown me a lot of different things that I never knew coming into kind of entrepreneurship. And if I can even just give back a little bit and really participate in, hopefully engaging the community and helping others that may have an idea. Like, I think I might want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't start down that career path, but maybe I'm mid-career now, or I'm thinking about going to college for whatever degree, but maybe I want to be an entrepreneur. Maybe there's a lot of different paths that can be taken, or I already have an idea. I'm in the midst of validating that idea, but I need help to get to the next stage. Maybe it's capital raising. Maybe it's a team of people to put around me. So this really, Distillery Labs really, I think was a hub of a lot of this activity. And certainly developing ecosystems is not one that can be pushed top down. So I don't see Distillery Labs as this place that can push out entrepreneurship and say, here's what we're going to do and how we do it. We've got to engage the community. And that's what I'm excited about, is really, over the next several months, one of my key objectives is to get to know as many people in this community as possible, in every corner of the community, whether they're entrepreneurs or have, or in corporate innovation, want to start a small business, want to start a high growth business, whether it's in a technology field or it could be a mom and pop style shop. There's a lot of different directions. And so this was something that really drew me to the area. And then secondly, I know this is a long answer to your question, Andrew, but I grew up in small towns. I know I'm moving from Chicago, but that's not where my heart is. I spent all of my childhood in smaller Midwest communities. My family moved around a lot, was born in Battle Creek, Michigan, lived in Richmond, Indiana, graduated from high school in Erie, Pennsylvania. So all kind of towns similar size to Peoria. So I'm excited to kind of get back to some of those roots.
Super. Paul, first of all, welcome to Peoria, to you and your family. We're excited to have you, and thanks for joining us this evening. We're looking forward to getting to know you a little bit more. I guess my question to you, for those who might be watching us tonight, can you tell us a little bit about your role as the executive director? What will your responsibilities include, and what are you most looking forward to within those?
So the role as executive director is really very, very broad ranging. A lot of different responsibilities, but the core responsibility, kind of day one here in this year, especially, is going from 0 to 1, nothing to something, right? It's got to get off the ground. And so it's in a phase of growth that I love. I mean, my passion is around businesses that are ideas in heads, maybe on a piece of paper, but it needs to get out into the real world. It needs to show, something that's tangible, right? And so I love this phase. And so a lot of the work over the next year and 2 years, 3 years is going to be getting this to growth and reality, so we can open our doors hopefully here either at the end of 2021 or very, very early 2022. But the role is going to be around, getting the facility open, building a business plan really for the organization so that it can be sustainable long term. Now, whether that's around sponsorships, or memberships, how those memberships work, how we engage with the community, how we engage with corporations, how we engage with academic institutions, finding what that sustainable model is financially, so it's fiscally sustainable for the long run, is going to be one of the early objectives. Third is really, kind of going around and developing the team of folks that will be on the ground, running programs, developing entrepreneurship related educational sessions, tying into all parts of the community, making sure that we're representing every voice in the community. We've opened our doors to a very diverse population and have created ways to support them. And so figuring out kind of how best to go about that, and like I just mentioned to Andrew, kind of this time frame to listen and understand kind of where we are as a community, and what's the community looking for from Distillery Labs, is what problem are we solving. Very similar to what you might ask for any startup. What are we solving for? Here's the problem, here's how the community faces that problem, and here's how we can help address that problem.
Let me just quickly ask a follow-up to what you said. Thank you for that. Who is the audience? Maybe who is the customer for what value you will bring to our area? Who should be most excited to have a role like yours filled within Peoria at Distillery Labs?
So that's a challenging question, to pinpoint kind of one sole voice, one sole customer, because I think it's such a diverse community. And I think that's what's going to make it such a vibrant community at the end of the day too, because yes, there's a lot of great corporations that are doing innovative things. There's also a lot of small business owners like you at Zion Coffee. And then there's a lot of others in the community that think they might want to be entrepreneurs. They're not sure what path to take and how to get there, whether they're early in their career or later in their career. So we've got to figure out a way to kind of bridge what I consider two ends of the spectrum. You've got, the corporations that are really, driving some cutting edge innovative products and technologies that can be very intimidating to somebody who doesn't have an engineering degree or a computer science degree. So we've got to help those corporations as well, hopefully drive an ecosystem here locally that sees their activities move forward, but at the same time, not excluding anybody at the other end of the spectrum where we're just getting started, whether it's a tech type company or not a tech type company. Could be a retail, could be a restaurant, could be a coffee shop, could be a brewery, a distillery. Lots of different ways to kind of bubble up activity at that end. And so kind of figuring out how to bridge the two and making sure we're relevant to all of those parties is going to be very, very critical.
I know this is just week one for you, so some of these questions. Probably you would answer them probably differently in a few months from now. But is the vision to also partner with other local entities that exist in this space? I mean, I think about our universities, I think about other organizations that are targeting, assisting entrepreneurship in the area. Are you also considering that as you're developing a vision for the role in Distillery Labs?
Absolutely. And in fact, that's what's taking a lot of my time now, is kind of getting introduced to what those organizations are, what they've been doing, the great programs and work that's been done to date. There's a lot of exciting things that different organizations have taken on in the community, and it's great to learn what they're doing, from from the chamber to the Economic Development Council, to the Peoria Innovation Alliance, and everyone else kind of across the community, ICC and Bradley's work. So it's really getting to understand who's out there, who's doing what. And I'm learning, hey, we tried this in the past and it didn't work. Here's why it didn't work. Maybe we try these things in the future. But aligning a lot of that, hopefully, with the mission and vision of Distillery Labs is going to be key. Just so there's not, 10 different organizations pulling in a similar direction, but moving with a lot of energy that's not coalescing around one vision.
I guess it's the 2020 issue all over again. You're muted, which I was, but I really, and we'll take a second to have a quick chuckle there. But really, Paul, I wanted to. We've talked before in December, but I really wanted our Peorians to really get to know you. So, Paul, a quick question: did you always think that you wanted to be in business when you were growing up?
I did not. In fact, I'm trying to count how many different times I changed my career aspirations, even, whether I was in, grade school, middle school, high school, all the way into college. Even in college, I probably changed my major 4 times, 5 times. It's one of those that my personality, and as everyone gets to know me, there's a lot of things that I love. I'm passionate about a lot of different things. I'm not world class in any one thing. I think I'm good at a lot of different things and kind of connecting a lot of different dots across various things. So that's what confused me for so many years. Like, there was not just one thing, like, oh boy, I'm a chemist through and through, and that's what I love. That's my passion. But I did discover early on, and my parents and friends can vouch for this, that I kind of had an entrepreneurial streak, and it was ideas around developing businesses. So even in high school, probably one of the most thriving, successful businesses I started was selling candy bars out of my locker. So this was, I'll date myself, but this is in high schools before vending machines were even allowed. So it was either you ate breakfast before you came to school, or you waited till lunch, or you waited till you got home. So I was the middleman in the middle, making sure that your hunger was met, your hunger problem was met. So I would sell candy bars out of my locker. So that was kind of the spark, and a little bit around, like, I can start businesses. There's things we can do to kind of solve problems for people. How do I identify those problems? And even going into college, even though my degree was more in the political science, public policy side, thinking that I did want to go into public service in the government, and actually moving to DC right after graduating college, I started keeping journals of different ideas that I came across, or problems that I discovered, or just brainstorm things like, oh, what if we could do this? So never thinking that at some point I would launch a larger growing organization, but had that in the back of my mind, like, as I wander down this path, there's going to be a time, there's going to be a spark that things will coalesce and come together to get something started. So that's, hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, it was one of those that sometimes you just don't know what the future holds, but you make sure that you keep your eyes open, keep active, and doors open, and interesting things happen.
So thank you for sharing that, Paul. You started by selling candies from your locker, and then you have gone the full cycle multiple times over, all the way into venture capital. Can you share a little bit more about, on the flip side, has that journey been like?
It's yeah, like I said, I started out in corporate. So when I got out of college, thinking that I did want to pursue public policy, I got an offer to work for a large consulting firm in DC. So we had a lot of clients that were in the federal government, from EPA to Department of Energy, Department of Defense. And I enjoyed that. But again, as I was in the DC market, it was interesting at the time. You think of Silicon Valley as really launching a lot of technologies. DC, especially Northern Virginia, was a hotbed of entrepreneurs and technology. And I think a lot of it was driven from AOL, if anybody remembers good old AOL. So a lot of interesting entrepreneurs spawn out of AOL, which was headquartered in Northern Virginia. But I ended up getting involved in a lot of kind of hacker groups and technology speakers and events, and just kind of went to a lot of different things. Again, things that I think are going to be fantastic at Distillery Labs, but it gets your mind rolling on different opportunities that exist. And so 5 years in DC, I knew I wanted to, it's time to start thinking about starting a business. And the advice that I got at the time from somebody that I did follow was, get into one of the best MBA programs you can possibly get into, go that direction, and some interesting things will begin to open up. So I ended up getting into Northwestern's program, but this was 1999. And funny story, 1999 was the height of the dot-com boom. Everybody was starting some dot-com, e-commerce type of company somewhere. And there's 600 full-time students that come into classes at Northwestern. And I would say probably 450 to 500 of those students said, I want to go venture capital, entrepreneurship, startup. It was all a buzz. And it got me thinking, I don't tend to like to follow the herd. And investment banks started coming into recruit and said, we have a ton of deal flow. We've got a lot of M&A activity. You can work on these technology deals, but from a different side of the table. Why don't you come work for us? So that was, again, an example of kind of a door opening that I never expected. I never thought I want to be an investment banker. But then, kind of heading down that path, I thought of being able to save as much money as I could. It was a good, lucrative career route. So if I can save money, and then when I am ready to start a company and I don't have to seek outside capital day one. So anyway, that's kind of where my head was going. So the path, again, is never this straight and narrow, perfectly defined way to get from A to B. But having done investment banking work for about 4.5 years, I knew it was time. My wife and I were living in North Carolina, wanted to get back to the Midwest. And so it was a kind of a good transition point. And so I stopped corporate work and started working on some business concepts. So over the past, that was 2004, 2005 timeframe. So over the past 15 years is kind of where I launched my entrepreneurial career. The very first company I started failed. So a company called Traditions Mark. We had wanted to be kind of this new cutting edge type of facility for seniors. So an assisted living, independent living facility, but much further away from kind of the healthcare end of the spectrum and much more towards a hospitality type end of the spectrum, designed with community as the center of the facility. Long story short, the market got super saturated with other competing products coming out. This was in Indianapolis. There were 4 other projects that got announced when we announced. And so myself and my investors, we decided to pull the plug on it instead of getting built and then not being able to recruit seniors to live in our community. So that was a failure, but that opened the door to opportunity 2, which was in the pharmaceutical space, delivering and managing medications in facilities like assisted living, like nursing homes, like behavioral health facilities. And I discovered through the process of working on the facility piece of it that it was an industry that hadn't changed. There was no innovation for about 30, 40 years. It was the exact same industry. There was billions and billions of dollars of wasted medications, because medications that would be dispensed and never taken by the patient because maybe they got discharged from the facility, maybe they got sent home, maybe the doctor changed their medication order. So there'd be thousands, millions and millions of pills that would just get flushed in a single facility over the course of a year. So it was all this medication that's either paid for by the patient or Medicare, Medicaid. And then two, the error rate, the number of errors that would happen giving the wrong pill to the wrong patient at the wrong time would be anywhere from 3 to 5%. So if you had a loved one in a facility, there's a chance that at some point they're going to get the wrong medication. So perfect problem to solve. Tons of wasted medications. We can help save capital. We can drive quality and efficiency. So that's where my second company was born, was WellFount, again, headquartered in Indianapolis. And we started managing these medications in nursing facilities, leveraging technology in the middle. So we used a dispensing machine that we actually sourced out of South Korea, that would basically on demand dispense medications one dose at a time. So you didn't get this 30-day supply. And it was right at the point of care, right where the patient needed it. And then we tied that into electronic medical records so that the nurse, the pharmacist, the doctor, and the family could see those medical records and what was getting dispensed. So it was a great success early on. We raised a significant amount of venture capital, a Midwestern VC firm out of Ann Arbor. And I think as I was exiting that opportunity in 2012, early 2013, we had close to 200 plus employees. So a good amount of business, but I did exit in 2013, moved back to Chicago, and then pursued other businesses. Obviously, in a similar business, Benu, to you, in terms of not a coffee shop, but started a business that was a coffee shop for beer, a place called Beer Miscuous, that still exists in Chicago. There's actually two locations, one downtown Chicago in Lakeview and one in a suburban location. But my idea there, so going from, again, a high growth venture capital backed business, technology driven, to something very different. So something that would, somebody might call a lifestyle business or a mom and pop shop. So you can pursue, I think, entrepreneurship in many different ways. And there's different excitements, challenges, problems, and goals to reach in different paths. So that's kind of been a bit of my entrepreneurial journey. And I've participated with a lot of other companies in terms of trying to, co-found with them a newer team of founders that are looking for help to get something off the ground. Having worked with a telecom company, a financial services company, and other healthcare companies to do that has been a part of the past 15 years as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have a follow-up question, and it's related to the word fails that you use in your experience. As an immigrant, I think this is part of the American culture that I don't quite understand. To me, I see a lot of fear of failure amongst my peers, especially female leaders in the entrepreneurship community. And I think it's a topic we don't talk enough about. I think culturally, we try to avoid failure. We try to hide failure. We like to talk about our successes, but not our failures. So I wanted to just kind of focus on that a little bit, since you were kind enough to openly share. What were some big lessons that you learned then through your failure?
Every failure kind of comes with its own set of lessons, which is great. I mean, that's the key piece of failure. It's like you're not setting out on the journey to fail, but you have to make the most of the failures that will inevitably come, no matter what it is. And it could be small failures, it could be life-threatening failures where a whole company fails because of wrong timing, wrong market, wrong demand, wrong product. I mean, all sorts of different things. The key lessons are really around making sure that you're celebrating failure as much as you are success, because that failure is what sometimes drives the next set of successes. It's the lessons that you learn in that failure when you go back and retroactively kind of pick apart, like, we made that decision, this failed, why? And you can actually then create a change around a product. And a lot of times, I mean, and this is kind of an interesting part of entrepreneurship that I think is starting to take hold, is you want to create those failures on a very small level and early on, and you want to do it fairly quickly. So let's get a product or a service in the market on a small scale. Let's test it. It may fail. Let's come back. Let's tweak it. Let's build on that. Let's go take it back to the market, test. And as the business grows and the opportunity grows, you continue that mindset that it's okay, and the team around you has to know that it's okay to fail. Um, as long as you're coming back and saying, why did it fail and what can we change about it, and let's move to the next success. So I think it's key to really, celebrate that across the entrepreneurship community. It's okay to do that. I mean, there's been so many examples of people that have started something and took 3, 4, 5, 10 times to finally get there. Failures, okay. Failure's good, as long as we're learning from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that insight.
And Paul, if I may, you also talked about a key point, which is the team. Um, how do you think we can both, start at Distillery Labs to create opportunities as a safe space for failing forward and also experimentation? What does that look like?
So it's starts with a lot of educational opportunities. I mean, chats like this, and understanding what that process looked like. So a lot of the goals over the next several years are going to be putting in place a lot of programs around kind of walking entrepreneurs through that process. How do you begin to create tests and experiments and failures up front? Test different ideas, come back with that failure, retest it, revisit it, and go through those iterations. So it does go through kind of an educational programmatic part of it. So that's a piece of it. And then secondly, it's the really environment that we're building, that we're not going to hide behind those failures. We're going to talk about them. There's no reason to sweep it under the rug and like, oh, I didn't make that mistake. It's okay. Let's talk about it. Let's put mentors in place and advisors in place that have gone through very similar journeys, to maybe help, kind of retrospectively pick apart, what are the things that we could have done differently, and now what do we need to change to make this a successful product or service. So I think it's a cultural shift that we have to make front and center. So we have to talk about it, and we have to celebrate that, that part of it. It
Thank you,
inevitably gonna
Paul.
come entrepreneurship. I mean, that's just a part of entrepreneurship.
You're
Innovation.
absolutely right. Yeah. So,
Go ahead.
okay. So I just want to make one very quick point. So, Paul, you're talking about the really foundational components of, the establishment of really good foundations, culture, and the types of values, and of course, psychological safety, because you need that psychological safety and to be able to be vulnerable and open for that experimentation and failure to happen well together to learn. Banu,
Yeah, I was just going to jump in as Paul was landing on the word innovation there, and some of the things that we talked about around experimentation. Andrew and I were chatting the other day. One of our core values at Zion is curiosity, and I believe it all starts with being curious, right? To get to innovation, we have to be imaginative. We have to ask ourselves the question of what if. We have to experiment. We have to fail, and that's how ideas are created. All ideas created twice, once in our head and hopefully one in real life, right? But for me, I think having experience working in large corporations, at times the word innovation has become even a word that people don't want to be associated with, because it can be intangible. It can be something that, oh, those people work on innovation. I've got a job to do. So, from your perspective, how do we bridge the gap between innovation being this nebulous concept to a tangible, deliverable, something that we can all connect with no matter what size organization we work in? I mean, I work in a small coffee shop. I'm sure you're going to be working with large organizations like some of our hospitals here. How do we make innovation tangible for everyone?
Right. Now that's a fantastic question, and one that has so many different components to it. I don't know that there's really one perfect right answer for it. Innovation used to be, locked up in the R&D closet. You had a lot of, scientists that would go away and experiment on a few things and design and develop something, brand new and come out with it. And that was innovation. Um, and then there were organizations corporations that looked at a lot of these co-working spaces and incubators and accelerators and said, "Hey, let's go build this beautiful big campus, and we're going to put whiteboards all over the place, and we're going to give everybody sticky notes, and we're going to design everything." And so they build these beautiful things, and nothing happens. Right? It's a lot of folks call it innovation theater. So it's just for looks, but we don't know where to go with it. I think where the rubber hits the road begins to bridge a lot of those pieces. And to your point, is that it's got to be a part of the culture. It can't be this group over here can only do that. This group over here are the entrepreneurs. They're the innovators. They're the scientists. Whatever it is, it's got to come from all of us. And that's where we're finding, kind of from a design thinking perspective, every part of an organization, every person individually as an entrepreneur, you're seeing through your lens how consumers are reacting to your product or service. So especially in a large corporation, you've got to get, it was a professor from Columbia, and I'm blanking on her name, that talked about snow melts from the edges. You've got to get out of the center of your organization, out to the edges of your organization, to see where change is occurring, to begin to kind of see around corners and understand what's coming next, because that's where you're hearing the activity from the consumer, the real life feedback. And it's not just what they're saying, it's seeing how they're interfacing with your product or service in real life. And it's those people on the front lines that are seeing that more than a core innovation team that sits in a beautiful place. And so that's where I think organizations are beginning to understand it takes everyone. Yes, there's the exploration team, and then there's the execution team. We still have to execute day to day, but innovation still, I think, comes through the lens of every employee. And I think taking that even out of just the corporate sphere into individuals, and individuals having those ideas, how do you begin to go out there and see how your idea will work in the real world, is a key part of that early on validation phase of putting out a small MVP, a minimum viable product early on, and seeing how it's interacted with, how consumers pick up your product, touch it, move it around, stick it up on a shelf, or however they interface with it. You're doing that type of ethnographic research where you're seeing how people interface with it. So I think a lot of those same concepts apply across the spectrum.
Thank
Great,
you.
Paul. Yeah. So, Paul, you talked about the environment. Of course, Peoria is unique, and unique in some aspects. And I want to go back to the culture piece that you were talking about. And that's such a big issue because, in order for people to even be able to get to a point where they feel like, hey, this is a safe space to fail, this is a safe space to be vulnerable. What do you think of the values and sort of the philosophy that you hope to bring to Distillery Labs?
So I think kind of an answer to that question takes me back to my upbringing. So little history on myself. The reason why we moved around so much as a child was I was raised in a minister's family, a Methodist minister, and so we were in a lot of different, small towns, small churches in all sorts of different communities across the Midwest. And my parents did a fantastic job of kind of instilling in me a lot of that, core belief of, do unto others as you want them to do to you. I mean, that kind of philosophy in general, and not just that core tenet, but how that plays out, across your entire life. And so I feel like I've, tried to pursue that in the business world as well. You want to make sure you're interfacing with people, with a community, in a way that you're basically, reaching out to them and listening to what's going on in their lives, trying to walk a mile in their shoes, understand what the situation is, and have a lot of empathy around what, various components are different from your life or what you're used to, right? Everybody lives in a different reality, but how can we bridge the gap is through that empathy, I believe. And so I think that's kind of stuck with me. And I really want to make sure, Distillery Labs, and I know we have on paper what that, value system is, and it sounds great. I mean, this welcoming open door, but just opening our door sometimes isn't enough. I want to go out there and actively seek engagement from every corner of the community. There's no idea that's a bad idea. There may be ideas that can be improved, and that's what we're here to help with. But let's hear those ideas. I want to understand what the pain points are. What are the problems that we need to solve? What are the obstacles? Why can't we have 1,000 new entrepreneurs in the next 5 years in Peoria? What is it we need? What is it you need as a community to get there, to succeed? You as an entrepreneur. So trying to understand that. I mean, so culture and values sound great, but it's really how we're going to act on that.
I think that's really, really excellent. Thank you. I guess I have a follow-up question since you touched on community and not only opening the doors to every corner of our area, but actively going out there and connecting, which leads me to the question of diversity and inclusion, which is really what you're touching on. Could you share a little bit about what diversity and inclusion means to you, especially in your new role?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, in my trajectory in business, I've discovered that, and I've really, promoted the fact that I don't want people sitting around any table, whether it's a board table, a conference table, a brainstorming session, where, no matter what role I'm in, even if it's a leadership role, that everyone just nods, says, yes, that this is the direction we want to go because you said it. We've got to have voices that are diverse, from diverse people, from diverse backgrounds, from diverse experiences. Those experiences enliven and create vibrant conversations, and out of those comes solutions that are much more robust, that will last, a lifetime. If we don't get all of those voices involved, this is going to be a very short-lived project, and would be very unfortunate. So we've got to intentionally do this. This can't be just let's post our values on a nice banner inside the front door of Distillery Labs, and we hope people will understand that we're inclusive and we're seeking a diverse audience. I think we have to actively do that. And there's a lot of different things that are going to be part of that process. One, we've got a board that right now is made up of some of the big corporate sponsors, which is fantastic. Great advisors. I'd love to see that board expand to a lot of other individuals that are from diverse parts of this community, with experiences that they can share, I think, to help us develop what we're looking to develop over the next several years. And hopefully, entrepreneurs as part of that, people that have gone through the experience, not just voices from the academic world or corporate world. And then as we begin to think about the team of folks that are going to drive the level of services and programs every day, that group has to come again and represent every corner of the community. So those are some of the things that, again, we have to be intentional about and very active to pursue, and not just say we're doing that.
Okay, thank
So, Paul, I guess just to follow up on that question, you know, in terms of Distillery Labs, you talked about programs and inviting people to experiment and to explore the ideas that they have and to make them into viable businesses. Um, how are we going to be doing this at Distillery Labs?
That is a great question, Andrew. We have a lot of work to do, I think, to lay out the plan to get there. And I think part of that process over the next few months is going to be, again, understanding the problem we're solving for. Um, and that's going to take a lot of listening and communication with all parts of the community. So the programs may change based on what problem we're solving for, and it's going to be an iterative process. I've got some ideas. I mean, I think there's some interesting things that are going on in the startup world. Um, yeah, I've done a lot of research and work with startup studios or venture studios. They're kind of used synonymously, but really think of them as a business that, as its product, manufactures other businesses. So it's a way to kind of create ideas in a very efficient, very effective manner, where you can drive speed to market and success rates significantly higher. Um, is there a way to do that at Distillery Labs? It's still something that I want to continue to explore. It's never been done that I know of in this type of public community-based forum. It's usually done with either private organizations, corporations have created some startup studios. Um, there are some startup studios through universities, but not kind of in a very connected environment like this, which is much more community based. So exploring some of those concepts, and it could be, creating a program, just like a lot of programs are around accelerators, and I love accelerators, and that might be some of the programs that we create that are very defined timeframes and pushing companies through a process, and founders come out the other end, hopefully with a financing and growth trajectory that makes them successful. In a studio, how can Distillery Labs come in and perform much more of a co-founder role? How can we be much more kind of ingrained with you as the founder of this idea and help you accelerate and drive success and get a product to market with being a little bit more hands-on? So I think I see with other incubators a much more kind of hands-off passive role. We invite people in to develop their concepts, to hopefully through serendipity get ideas from other people inside that facility and drive innovation, provide some mentorship and assistance, but still be fairly passive. In a studio model, it's much more hands-on. So figuring out does that solve one of the problems here in the community? So understanding maybe how that works. So I think the answer to your question is that will begin to unfold over the coming months. And hopefully we'll have some better ideas of here are those exact types of programs that are going to be the most benefit for the Peoria region.
Well, let me ask a question. We've been speaking for 45 minutes, and you certainly have a lot of things on your plate right now as you try to wrap your mind around what has already been taking place, what needs to happen, connecting the dots across businesses, organizations, institutions. How big is your team right now versus what you plan on it to be in your new role? And I'm assuming it's not a very big team. First answer that, and I'll ask my follow-up question, I guess.
Right. Right now, in theory, it's a team of one, but there's been a lot of people that have been, pulling the weight in this organization well before my time. So a lot of folks, like OSF Healthcare has donated several of their staff to work on a lot of components. Greater Peoria EDC with Andrew and Chris and others that have done a lot of heavy lifting. Working
Mhm.
groups that have been put together. So I don't want to say that we're only a team of one. I mean, yes, I'm the only
Mhm.
in theory employee right now,
Mhm.
um, but that's that will change, and it's great to have a community surrounding me that is already providing a lot. I think a lot of benefit to where this organization is going to go. My hope, and again, this is something that I'm still sketching out in terms of what that team needs to be, and I think that relates back to Andrew's question a little bit about what those programs need to be too.
Mhm.
um, I foresee, somebody who is related to, full time in programmatic development and education development. Somebody who's dedicated full time to community engagement and kind of bringing that community in, whether it's through memberships or educational sessions, building bridges with institutions. Had a great conversation with somebody the other day around workforce development and what they're doing in school age children and how can we bring
Okay.
those programs in. So somebody dedicated to that world. And then back to the question too of making sure we're also driving and bringing in innovation from the local corporations as well, um,
Mhm.
and basically providing a space for somebody who's in those corporations that has a great idea and is looking for a platform to really spread their wings and grow a business. Um,
Yeah, I think that's really, really exciting for us to look forward to. If you were to look at your role in 2021 as you're stepping into it, um, what would you say is your top goal that at the end of the year, when you look back, if you have not met it, you can say, you know what, I missed the mark? What would you say you're going to be focusing on? Because there's no way party of one can do all the things, right? I mean, we can
right.
aspire, and yes, we can collaborate. But what is the target for you for year one to have accomplished within Distillery Lab for Peoria?
There's probably at least two or three things that are core, not just one thing. I mean, one of the one of the first things is you know, renovating the space at the Thomas building is going to take time. I mean, finalizing architectural work, getting contractors involved, completing construction is a very long process, and so that's got to be a process that's accomplished quickly. So my goal by the end of this year is that we've announced the grand open date. Now, whether that date happens in 2021, it's still uncertain, but if it doesn't, hopefully it's very early 2022. So that's goal number one. Two is back to a lot of things we've talked about is the programmatic piece of it. I mean, we were sitting here in a year again where COVID is impacting everything that we do and can do. Um, how do we begin to develop some programming now that is continuing to outreach for with a virtual world? Are there programs we can create beyond Whiskey Talks, which has been a fantastic success in a virtual world? And then as we can open up again, and before Distillery Labs is physically open, what are some of the in-person things that we can begin to do to drive and spark some inspiration for entrepreneurship and innovation? So that's kind of the other component. Third is making sure I think we've nailed down a way to make sure that this is sustainable. And that's got multiple components. One, the financial sustainability of it, and two, the community sustainability of it. So the community sustainability is making sure we've got those voices at the table, and we're working towards making sure that they're heard, integrated, and a part of the process along. The financial piece is making sure, how does this business And it's still a business, even though it's funded through a grant. There's operating expenses every year that are going to have to be taken care of. How do we make sure we can roll out those programs, fund them, fund the staff that's going to support those programs, hopefully develop other elements of it, whether it's capital funds that invest in businesses or other things, is all about how we make sure that that financial platform is built correctly. So what does that model look like? Is it based primarily on memberships? Is it sponsorships? Is it other corporate engagements, academic engagements, more grants? What exactly does that look like is a big piece of this year too.
Yeah, you definitely have your work cut out for you, Paul. Welcome back again to Peoria. But I guess for me, you touched on something, the elephant in the room we're all experiencing. Last year was a really, really hard year for everyone I know in my circle, and certainly going into this year, we're more hopeful. But we don't know when this thing is going to turn the corner, where businesses will start thriving again. The latest statistics that I've read says that 30% of small businesses are closed compared to where we were pre-COVID, right here in Peoria area, which is obviously concerning as a small business owner myself. As you look at kind of entrepreneurship, innovation, the space that you will be playing a key role in, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see that's unique to 2021 as we try to navigate our way out of a pandemic? What are your thoughts around that?
There's a little bit of challenge, and I think there's a little bit of opportunity too. The challenges for certain, and this is something that I'm keeping a very close eye on too, Benu, as you are, because I still have interest in beer miscuous. So I exited the business and sold it to a fantastic management team that's doing everything they can to make sure the lights stay on and the doors stay open. But they're a retailer, a physical footprint that doesn't have an online presence. It's alcohol, and it's not a really great product to be delivering and doing e-commerce on. So it's something near and dear to my heart in terms of understanding where the whole community is. If you have a physical retail type of presence where the traffic just isn't there. And I think it's great. It's shown some opportunities where you can get creative with maybe takeout product or e-commerce product if you can. But I think we're still going to be challenged with that. And a lot of the business concepts going forward are going to have to think through, could there be another 2020 in the future? And what does that impact have on the potential business plan that I'm trying to create? On the opportunity side, I see some interesting things, especially for a region like Peoria. We've learned throughout the year that we can work from just about anywhere for most jobs, not every job. And a lot of people that, Peoria is trying to attract in terms of, technology talent and others that are very entrepreneurial in spirit and have ideas and want to pursue those ideas. I think reality, is showing that you can do that from a location in central Illinois just as easily as you can do in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, in New York, in Chicago. And a lot of those people are thinking like, maybe I grew up in Peoria, I might still have family there. Maybe I went to Bradley or ICC, or have, maybe my path took me through one of the corporations in Peoria. I need to get out of the high rent district in Manhattan, and where would I like to go and continue to do the job that I'm doing? So I'm hoping we can maybe bring back some resources, excellent mentors, people that have gone through the journey back to Peoria, as mentors, as investors, as prospective, potential entrepreneurs, that before COVID, kind of, you didn't really have some of that virtual opportunity. Corporations aren't going to go back full time into bricks and mortar. They're going to leave a significant amount of staff virtual. So you can kind of work from anywhere. And you look at Peoria's region, low cost of living, very diverse, lots of opportunity, interesting landscape. It's got a lot of elements that I think are going to draw people in. So I think there's there's kind of the opportunity end of COVID too that I'm excited about.
You
Great,
make
thank
a
you.
really good you make a really good point, Paul. And we have time just for one last question from James. He is asking, are there any focus areas within the business sphere that Distillery Lab seeks to attract, or are all businesses and ideas supported?
I think the latter is the answer. All ideas are encouraged and supported. Absolutely, there are areas that the region is strong in, and those are some focus areas for sure. From health and wellness to agriculture technology to autonomous driving and vehicles. So there's certainly areas that will have a focus on them, but that in no way, shape, or form excludes anything else. Those are ways I think, as a region, can leverage our strengths. But you could have an interest in, Andrew, starting a sunglass company that fits perfectly on your head and ears while you're doing a video interview, and that's fantastic. Let's do it. I don't think there's any business that is off limits in terms of what we want to support and drive inside in the culture of Peoria.
Great. And so, I'm sure after this time on the webinar, there are going to be a lot of people who will want to reach out to you. What is the best way that they can reach out to you?
Hopefully, I can keep on top of my inbox, but happy to receive an email. If anybody wants to reach out to me, it's just paul@distillerylabs.org. And hopefully I, again, can stay on top of that inbox and get back to you. But I'd love to hear from every voice in the community, ideas, things that you want to pursue, challenges that you've incurred. Would love to hear from you.
Excellent. So I want to thank you, Paul, for your time today. Also, our special guest, Banu. Such a pleasure to see you again. We want to wish everybody a happy new year, and we will see you at the next Whiskey Talks. Bye for now.
Thanks, Banu.
Bye, guys. Thank you, Paul. See you around.